Funding for the art show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, and viewers like you. Thank you.
In this edition of the art show, a Dayton contemporary fiber artist manipulates dyes.
It can be very challenging. If you're looking to do something perfect, you're not going to get that with dye.
An Ohio artist is inspired by Asia and the Himalayas.
We've worked with the Dalai Lama on a number of occasions.
A studio on wheels comes rolling into town.
Well, maybe that's creativity is embracing some of those silly ideas.
And learn that there's more than what meets the eye when looking at a Norman Rockwell.
And if then you choose to spend more time looking at it, then more of the story gets revealed.
It's all ahead on this edition of The Art Show. Hello, I'm Rodney Veal, and this is The Art Show, where each week we showcase local, regional, and national artists and arts organizations. Fiber artists are often on the fringe of the art scene, perhaps not always getting the respect they deserve. Dayton artist Jackie Weatherly is trying to change that, one silk dye at a time.
I went to school at Meredith College in Raleigh, North Carolina, and did studio art. One of the classes there was the silk painting class that they offered, and I was hooked at that point. Textile art for me it's all about the visual part as well as the tactile part, being able to actually feel the material and the cloth, and painting with dye on silk and watching it travel across the material is very fascinating for me. You can add salt for texture, you can use resist to make it tight line, you can use all kinds of different diffusants so it can either travel or not travel, and it's a versatile material and it's just a lot of fun to work with. It can be very challenging. If you're looking to do something perfect, like with oil painting or acrylic, you're not going to get that with dye because dye tends to travel all over the material. And if you use a resist, which is a kind of a Gouda type of thing where you draw on the silk to keep the dye from flowing, then you can do a little more with that. Otherwise, it's its own animal. Usually I have an idea in mind what I want to paint. I'll have my own photograph of a flower or an animal or something, and I'll transfer that by drawing it on with a resist and then painting with the dye, and if you put salt on for texture effect. And then same for the resist, you have to wait for that to dry or you can iron set it. The dyes that I use are Jacquard red label dyes, and they require to be steam set so that they don't run when they get wet and that type of thing. You wrap it up in newsprint and stick it in a steamer for about an hour and 45 minutes, and then pull it out and then rinse it, and then heat set it with an iron after that, and it should be good for wearable art. I do make scarves and ties and hand-painted silk that I'd make into a pendant or a pin. My favorite piece was the green sea turtle that I had made for a show at Meredith College. We used to live at the beach back in the 90s, and the sea art is a lot of what I focus on, or nature, flowers, and just the outdoors, Mother Nature mostly. I do some photography on the side, and oftentimes I'll take some photographs of my own flowers and I'll take them to a website called spoonflower.com, and I'll upload the imagery to that and do some mirror imaging and printing on either cotton or silk or linen, and make yardage from that. I do some freehand machine embroidery, non-traditional quilting with those fabrics, and I've also made handbags. There was a piece that I had down at the Dayton Visual Arts Center, and it was a silk piece that was attached to the top of the frame, but the sides and the bottom were loose so that when people walked by, the air tended to pick it up and pull it away from the actual frame. And people stopped and turned around and looked at that, and they weren't quite sure what to make of it. And one gentleman actually walked up and pulled the corner up and looked underneath it to see what was going on underneath the piece. And then he was like, okay, nothing there, and walked away. I wanted to be different from everybody else, and a lot of people do watercolor or oil painting or acrylics, so fiber arts is just a different art form.
If you yourself are a fiber artist, get in touch with Jackie. Look her up on Facebook or visit thinktv.org and click on the art show for a link to her website. Since completing his studies in New York and Paris, Phil Sugden has made 12 journeys throughout the Himalayas and Tibet. His drawings have been published in an exquisite full-color exhibition catalog entitled Visions from the Fields of Merit, Drawings of Tibet and the Himalayas. He is currently an assistant professor of fine arts at Bluffton University and shares about art and meditation.
My name is Phil Sugden. I'm a professional artist, painting and drawing, and I teach half-time at Bluffton University in the art department. The creative process, I think, is no matter what your profession, mechanic, farmer, whatever it is, it can be a creative process. And in that process, it really focuses you, brings you into the moment. I think that is about as close as you can get to what some people call God or whatever. It's that one-pointedness. When you're in that place, that's the place where you have all the baggage that you carry around in your head, and the biases and all the prejudices, they're all gone. They don't exist there. But what does exist is a sense of real connection. What inspires and influences my work mostly is probably maybe meditation and probably those travels to the east, to India and Tibet, coming in contact with people over there who are very interesting. We've worked with the Dalai Lama on a number of occasions and other lamas, and they're quite willing to sit and talk about these ideas. But mostly just experiencing those places, just being there. In the studio, I'm comfortable. You know, I can get distracted very easy. But over there, when you're out on that plateau and the wind's blowing, it's a different kind of experience that allows you to come in direct contact with that subject matter that you're focused on. It's life-changing to be there, just to be there. And I think that has probably influenced my work more than anything else. Current work entitled Pages from the Manual on Dismantling God. This piece is about my own self-exploration, questions on why, how I'm connected to this environment. And as a final piece, when it's hanging, it will be a piece that allows the viewer to walk into it, have a particular experience, more sort of an intuitive experience of the work, and maybe get a similar experience to what I had. It's always difficult to do for an artist to have a certain experience, put it down, and then have the viewer have the same experience. It's really hard to do, but I want to get at least some sense of that going on for the viewer for this work. And that piece, and maybe one or two other pieces that I've done, I think worked. Everything else for me is part of that journey, part of that art is a journey, and part of a kind of a struggle. But every once in a while, something works so well. The experience of that inspired the piece worked really well, and coming back to the studio and it all comes out, and sometimes it just is the perfect storm, you know, of creativity. I have to let it take its own time. The image, a lot of times the image just shows up. The work finds its way onto the paper and onto the canvases, and you gotta let it do that. You know, you can't not do it as an artist. I have to do this. It's like I don't have a choice. It's a visual thing, it comes through, that's my language mostly. You know, you speak with a lot of guitar players and their language is this music that they play. This is my language. Each piece is like a mirror, you know. I look at it after it's finished a lot of times and I say, what is that? You know, especially the gigantic piece behind me here, and it took me a long time to figure some of this stuff out. But that's the idea for an artist, is to look at that and figure it out. Then you know who you are as an artist.
For a schedule of Phil's upcoming shows or to see more of his work, visit thinktv.org and click on the Art Show.
Are you an artist or know an artist with an interesting story? Pitch it to us. Send an email to theartshow@thinktv.org. Include contact information and links to performances or art samples online.
If you've been in Albuquerque, New Mexico, perhaps you spotted Axel Contemporary, an art studio and gallery rolling around the city on wheels. It's an art experiment that has Albuquerque abuzz. So join us now as we go along for a ride.
Hey, where is the heart of the city exactly? It's a really big... Mile zero. It's a very big heart because it starts somewhere up that way and then it goes all the way down.
We're working with 516 Arts, and they have a project called Heart of the City about downtown Albuquerque.
This is Axel Contemporary. It's a mobile art gallery.
It's a place for people to show their creativity.
It's an experiment in art distribution.
It's something that we began building together, not really knowing if we would do one show or two shows or one show a year or how it would go. But it seemed like something that would be really fun to do.
The idea is to promote experimentation in the arts. Maybe more importantly is to bring art to people who may not normally experience art.
I find that a lot of times artists are working with galleries, they're tied into doing one kind of art, and so it was a way to be, both for myself and for others, to be able to show a more diverse body of work.
Installation projects, performance art, promoting the idea of things outside the van. We did a haiku road sign project. We asked the Poet Laureate of Santa Fe to select 32 of these. That's a really great way of seeing the community and allowing them to express themselves.
Some of the artists we show have never shown before. Some have been showing for 40 or 50 years. We were able to expose a lot of people to artwork who choose not to go to galleries or museums for whatever reason. A lot of people come to our gallery because the truck looks really cool and they love trucks. And then they come in and they see the art and they find that really interesting.
This is called E pluribus unum. What we've been doing is taking photos of each person. They bring in an object that they have resonance to or that is of consequence to them. And so it's not just a picture of somebody, it's a picture of somebody and something.
I just love it. I love this book so much. It's really important to me.
It's a portrait of Albuquerque and revealing itself to Albuquerque. And that goes with this idea of heart of the city. I was toying with that notion, heart of the city. Does that mean like the central part of the city, or does that mean the spiritual heart of the city?
Your expression changes with each shot. Awesome.
E pluribus unum means in Latin from any one, and for me it is the culture, the life that we have together through recognizing the differences and individuality and specialness of all of us, the beauty and the horror, and the love and the death, and that all those aspects of being human or being animal or being incarnate in some way have a essential beauty to them.
Oh goody, come on in.
I think my perception is that people in general actually are pretty kind, and in general they're actually really there for us, for each other. We're all there for each other. And I believe that if I were to go anywhere, I would get this kind of a feeling that people are caring, people want to participate, people are engaged. It just needs somehow to be encouraged.
Well, come on in. Raise it up a tiny bit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate this. This is awesome. This is a great project.
I'm really glad
really excited to be part
you're
of it.
here to participate
Yeah,
too.
thank you. Thank you for letting everyone come.
Spending the time here, there seems to be a lot of presence of the people, a lot of openness and enthusiasm.
Oh, they're just under
When
your
you look at these photos, you see Albuquerque reflected. You see in the clothing, in the faces.
Yeah, work the camera. That's it, girl. Work the camera. Let's see some smiles.
And in diverse backgrounds, diverse ethnic backgrounds, diverse cultural backgrounds. And I think that's a reflection of Albuquerque. We also take all of those pictures, which is several hundred, and digitally layer them together using transparent layers. So we create one image, which is one face, which is a portrait of everyone in the project. It's equal portions of several hundred people.
And particularly with this project, I find when I meet these people as individuals, it gives me great hope, great optimism. They all are sharing in the experience, and they're all very happy, and it just makes me think that a lot of what we hear about society and the horrors of it all, it's overblown. When you take each of these people individually, the experience is entirely different.
I feel like this is something we started out of a spirit of play and fun, and I don't feel like we have some deep, important message we're trying to communicate. I think the message is what people take from it. I think people's enthusiasm for what we're doing is, the message is part of that. For me, the lesson of this, as a creative person, when you have an idea, no matter how strange or outlandish it is, to really consider it, consider doing it, rather than say, well, that's a silly idea, why would I do that? Well, you know, say, well, maybe that's creativity is embracing some of those silly ideas and some of those strange ideas.
Personally, I have kind of a wider definition of art, that it's rather difficult not to make art. It's more of a choice to do something well. It's a way to express yourself, to know who you are, and then turn around and give it back.
To see what Axel Contemporary is up to next, visit thinktv.org and click on the art show. We now travel to the Newark Museum in New Jersey and re-examine the iconic work of American artist Norman Rockwell. Though the appeal of Rockwell's images in part lies in their visual accessibility, the museum's chief curator advises us to look beyond the surface.
The exhibition is really a survey of Rockwell's career, and although it's divided into various thematic categories, what it really is about is how he himself changes as an artist and a man over the course of his lifetime. I'm Ulysses Dietz. I'm the chief curator at the Newark Museum, and I'm the curator of the Norman Rockwell exhibition. The two paintings I chose as my favorites out of the exhibition really resonate with me because they both deal with African Americans, which is something that is not traditionally associated with Rockwell's work, and yet is something that is an underlying theme of a lot of his career and becomes a motivating theme toward the end of his career. The magic of all of Rockwell's magazine covers is that you get the story instantly. And if then you choose to spend more time looking at it, then more of the story gets revealed. It's initially a very simple thing. It's a little boy on a train trying to figure out how to calculate his tip while the African-American waiter looks on, smiling. It's a very archetypal Rockwell adult-child interconnection. An adult being protective and benevolent toward a child who wants to live up to that expectation. But beneath the surface of that is a much more complicated story. It was an acknowledged policy on the Post covers that no African American could be shown except in a position of service, of subservience to any white people. And that is carried through in that we have the little boy is a customer on the train, and the African-American man is the waiter, so he is his servant. But what's interesting to me in this painting is that Rockwell takes that truth and I think very consciously subverts it by making the African-American waiter both servant and master. He is the adult, he dominates, he's looking down on the little boy, but he's looking down on him with this protective, paternal look on his face. So it gives him a position of power and dignity, which is really pushing the boundaries of what the policies in journalism were at the time. The second gallery in this exhibition focuses on his later career and centers on Murder in Mississippi, which was published in 1965 as an illustration in Look magazine for an article of the same title. I think it's the most powerful image, most modern image he paints in his entire career, but I'll also say it's the least attractive picture. It's not one I would want to live with, but it's one I can't stop thinking about. He's commissioned to do this illustration for an article that is about the unreeling story of the murder of 3 young civil rights workers in Mississippi at the hands of rogue sheriff and the Ku Klux Klan. And they are singled out by this sheriff and his cronies, and they're essentially kidnapped, beaten up, and then shot point blank out in the country and then buried in shallow graves. And all of this becomes part of Rockwell's research, part of that complicated, obsessive preparation style. He goes so far as to obtain human blood and to buy a white shirt like one of the men is wearing to get a sense of what it would really look like. He researches poses, he researches lighting. I mean, he does a whole different kind of research in this than he's ever done before to produce this extraordinarily sort of chilling moment, which is literally the moment when they look at their captors just before they're killed. So it's an extraordinary, dark and chilling moment, and it's something unlike anything Rockwell has ever painted. Indeed, the painting, the finished painting, is not the painting that was published. What ultimately gets published is the sketch, which is unheard of in all of his long career. He never publishes a sketch, ever. But this is the one that, to him, had all the emotional power of it. There are a lot of other paintings that appear at the end of his career, and while none of them are quite so dramatic and graphic, a lot of them are touched by his shifting vision of the way the world is, which is to say, he can no longer pretend that anything is perfect and romantic and beautiful, and all of his later work tends to touch on some aspect of this brokenness, and it makes his later work fascinating. And while I focused on these two paintings because they represent such a dramatic shift in Norman Rockwell's style over the course of 20 years of his career, they really are just the tip of the iceberg in what is an extraordinarily rich visual feast for anybody who's interested in commercial art, anyone who's interested in fine art, or interested simply in the evolution of an artist.
In November of 2011, American Chronicles, The Art of Norman Rockwell was a special exhibit at the Dayton Art Institute. This was the museum's most attended exhibit in history, with over 44,000 people reminiscing over a Rockwell. It just goes to show the relatability of Norman Rockwell. And that wraps it up for this edition of The Art Show. Please take time out of your busy schedule to head out and see some fantastic art. Until next time, I'm Rodney Veal, and thanks for watching.
Funding for the Art Show was made possible by Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, the Virginia W. Kettering Foundation, proud supporter of the arts in our community, Ohio Arts Council, Ohio Humanities Council, and viewers like you. Thank you.